Down to the Wire podcast, episode 14. We are back, updating you with the latest and greatest from sport from the previous week. Got an interesting episode this week. Going to be talking about the NFL, Super Bowl. I'm going to be talking about the Six Nations, what happened on the weekend and all of those fixtures. Some of the key talking points. Going to talk a bit about football. Going to talk about Formula 1 a little bit as well, because that's coming back fairly soon, which is quite nice. Jack, how are you?
You know, this has probably been one of the most down weeks I've had in ages. I was so gutted when the Chiefs lost.
Well, just for context, we're recording this. Normally we record on a Monday. We're recording this on a Thursday this week because we needed... I feel like I needed the time to kind of let the results sink in. Spoilers if you haven't seen the Super Bowl. But yeah, just needed time to let it sink in and kind of... I guess, you know, we get over the emotional bit and now we can just kind of assess it like from a distance kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
Not let our immediate emotions take over. And on that note, we're also joined by Josh. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing okay. I have similar feelings to Jack, actually. I woke up Monday morning and I was like, oh, yeah, that actually happened last night, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And, yeah, from the point of view of the teams I support, I have said this a few times to a couple of people this week, but 2019 and 2020 were like, they were dream stuff, really. You know, you've got a Welsh Grand Slam, Liverpool winning 4 trophies, Chiefs Super Bowl, and then 2021 is turning into, you know, the real opposite at the moment. You know, Liverpool struggling to get 2 wins in a row, let alone 4 trophies, and yeah, gutted about the Chiefs as well, but glad to be back.
Okay,
it's not all doom and gloom, is it?
I'm glad you finished off with "I'm glad to be back" because at this rate it made it sound like we'd forced you on.
Yeah.
So yeah, glad you've returned. On that note, then, I guess we should. I guess we have to talk about the Super Bowl, don't we? Super Bowl 55. This is a spoiler alert. If you've not watched the Super Bowl, the result was Buccaneers 31, Chiefs 9. Right, let's get stuck in. Jack, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll be honest, it was a really boring watch. Not because they were 2 boring teams, but because one team... It wasn't as such they had injuries across the whole team. It was just they had injuries to a lot of the same type of players. Similar to Liverpool, with having loads of injuries to their centre-backs. A little bit different, though, in the sense that they had a little bit more backup than Liverpool planned. And I put down that the result came down to 3 things. And it was offensive line failures, because they were the group which was so injured. And there was so much moving around that they just got decimated by that Tampa Bay pass rush. I put referees, because I know people always go, people will blame anything. But the referees did make some... It did seem like all the 50-50 calls were going one way. And some of the calls that weren't even 50-50 were going Tampa Bay's way. And it's a bit like, this isn't great. And then I also put dropped passes, because, to be fair to Mahomes, he played absolutely electric. He was running for his life, and he still made some incredible throws. And the Chiefs, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, were just dropping everything. So yeah, it was a really naff one to watch from my perspective.
It was I don't want to say a no-show because that implies that. Well, I guess it was kind of a no-show, really. Is in the, you know, considering how good the Chiefs are normally, and perhaps that's why it feels like a no-show, because the Chiefs are normally so good that when they didn't score a touchdown,
and
I don't.
That was what was disappointing.
I've not been a Chiefs fan particularly long, but as in, it probably around 3 years now, and that's the first time I've seen the Chiefs not score a touchdown in a game.
I think it was a relative no-show, Jack. I think aside from Mahomes, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that Tampa Bay played well. Like, they did play very well, and a poor Chiefs performance doesn't take away that from the Buccaneers. And you know, we've already chatted, and we chatted to other people as well about the very different merits of the Buccaneers O-line protecting Tom Brady and the Chiefs O-line protecting Patrick Mahomes. It's not comparable, and as such, you can't really compare Brady's performance with Mahomes' performance. And I read a really good article to that end earlier this week. The whole NFL world, possibly the whole sporting world, was dreaming of a shootout between Brady and Mahomes, because you've got Brady, who is pretty much the undisputed GOAT, and then you've got Mahomes, who is the one man in football who people think might actually be able to surpass Brady. And I think what people the whole narrative was these two, and those two in a head to head for at this level, possibly for the last time, because whether they both get back to a Super Bowl again, it's not unreasonable to assume that either of them will. I think one of them might, but anyway, and the circumstances just completely blew that narrative out of the water, didn't they? Because one of those quarterbacks had a platform to perform and did. Like, Brady played well, and Brady made no mistakes. Brady threw no picks, but the other quarterback was fighting a losing battle from the beginning. And I think for me, that was the gutting thing, is that so many times for the Chiefs, Mahomes has kind of put his cape on and dug them out, and there's been plenty of times where Mahomes has spent a lot of a match under pressure on a lot of his snaps, and he's always found a way out. Whereas this time it was just, it wasn't, it was beyond him. But I think it just showed that no, it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is. It doesn't matter how well he is at making unscripted plays and improvising on the snap. You can't continually win when your O-line, or you can't continually complete and make yardage when your O-line is just being decimated.
Yeah. Let's look at each bit in particular. Start with
Jack, take us through
the offensive line. I mean, I've put down in our notes who the offensive linemen were and who they were replacing. So, an offensive line is the 5 people who stand in front of the quarterback, and their job is just to protect the quarterback. Don't let people get to him, or at least give him a bit of time to do stuff. But left tackle, the furthest guy on the left, he was a replacement for a guy called Eric Fisher, who got injured in the championship against the Bills. I don't know if that was during one of the Bills' just brawls against the Chiefs or what, but basically, like Mike Remmers, who's replaced Eric Fisher, has played right tackle. So that's the complete other side of the line for the last 3 months. That was moved there because of the injury. At right tackle is a guy called Andrew Wiley. And that guy is replacing Remmers. And he was moved from right guard to right tackle because of that injury. Then the man who was moved to right guard is a guy called Stefan Wisniewski. And that was his first start of the season. And that was to replace Andrew Wiley, who was only in the team to replace a guy called Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, who opted out for the season.
Because he's a medic, isn't he, Duvernay-Tardif?
So if you go back to the core there, the guy who was playing right guard opted out, so they had to play a backup there, who got moved to right tackle so that somebody else could come in, all because of injuries. And then that doesn't even go to the left guard, a guy called Nick Allegretti, who replaced another starting guy who got injured in week 5. And then the only other guy we haven't mentioned is the centre, who got benched for 2 weeks mid-season. So that 5 was basically all moved around into their incorrect positions, all to replace people who were better than them, or people who opted out. And it was just like, there was no chance that it was going to do well.
It's worth mentioning here as well, as kind of going on what Josh has said, is it doesn't matter how good Mahomes is, if he's got no protection, he's always going to struggle to a certain extent. That was clear, as in Mahomes was having to move like almost immediately out of the pocket just to get a little bit of space. And on top of that, he was playing with a dodgy toe.
Yeah, he had 2 toes, which he's corrected already. Yeah. I think he's had the surgery either today or yesterday. But he was pressured 29 times in the Super Bowl. That's 52% of plays. That's the most in Super Bowl history. He ran...
It's crazy, isn't it?
This is going to be my stat of the week later, but I'm going to say it now as well. He ran for 497 yards before
throwing any
of his passes or sacks. so just
that,
running
that,
around
that's not
before
just
throwing.
yeah.
Nuts.
That's not even like. And just to clarify, that's not like he's looked up and gone, right, my option here is to run myself.
No.
That's literally just so he can get a pass away or avoid being sacked.
Well, that's trying to buy time, isn't it? That's trying to buy yourself a time or a window or an opening to get a throw off, or to then run.
The difference where I think they showed the same play which they played in the Super Bowl. They played the exact same play against the Browns about 3 weeks ago, and it was the same play, and you notice the difference having Eric Fisher on that line, where it meant that nobody else had to move position, and it was only 2 people who were subs then, and it was like they got the play. Mahomes had about 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds, threw the ball to Kelsey. Kelsey goes in for a touchdown, about 30 yards, and then on this, then they played this exact same play in the Super Bowl, and less than half a second, and all 4 of the Tampa Bay defenders were beyond the offensive line, almost on Mahomes, and he was running to the right hand side, and he just had nothing going on. So so basically there was nothing Mahomes could have done more, because he ran so far. He made pretty much perfect plays in the majority of the time, and he had basically people dropping balls left, right, and centre.
Yeah,
and it's worth considering at this point as well, as in on the flip side of that, then you had the Buccaneers, whose deep defense was incredible. As in they kind of man-marked Hill and Kelsey very well. So it's like a double-edged sword then. You've got the Mahomes as the quarterback, is being pressured no end and is having to move left, right and centre just to get a little space. And then when he does eventually get a little bit of space, he looks up and he can't find the option that really he wants to pass to.
Yeah, listen, like Tampa Bay... I was just going to say Tampa Bay defensively was superb in coverage and at the line of scrimmage. And, credit where credit's due, you can only play what's in front of you, and the Buccaneers at the line of scrimmage just ripped up whatever was in front of them. So from their point of view, this is what I was saying earlier, all that we're saying here takes nothing away from the Buccaneers' performance, but it does...
It was a job made easy.
It was. Yes. It was. Yeah. They executed very, very well.
Usually to pressure a quarterback as much as they did, you'd have to send 5 or 6 guys to beat those 5 guys that the Chiefs have there. But because they were able to do that for the entire game with just 4 people, it meant that, like Jack said, they could play those 2 deep safeties all game to take away that deep threat. So basically Mahomes he never had any options short. I don't know why they didn't script some more plays with some more like easy passes, like just quite quick ones. But even if he did extend a play by some miracle and not get absolutely torn to shreds by 4 guys running at him, he had no one to throw it to, because all the deep lanes were all blocked up by the fact that Tampa Bay didn't need to commit very many people to the pass rush. So it was complimentary in a way, but there was no chance basically for anything really to get going.
No. Do you know what the amazing thing is that having said all of that, there were at least 2 times. Well, I've got the 2 in my head. Well, there were the 2 times where, even with all of that going on, and Mahomes running all those yards pre-throw, and the 2 deep safeties and the pressure at the line of scrimmage, twice Mahomes threw to a receiver in the end zone who failed to make a catch, and the ball hit the face mask of the receiver, which tells you that the pass is on the money. If it's hitting the face mask of the receiver, it's not high, it's not high, it's not low. He's not having to change direction. It's right where you would want to receive it, both in the end zone, and that's 14 points. And having said saying how good Tampa Bay were at the line of scrimmage, how poor the Chiefs were at the line of scrimmage, how much pressure Mahomes was under, that's still 14 points, and all of a sudden it's 31-23. And then when you throw in, I know this is the next point we're going to come on to, but then when you throw in all of the penalties that the Chiefs gave away, you take even some of them away, and straight away you've got parity. So even though, I guess what I'm saying is Mahomes' performance, if his receivers catch a couple, if not more, really catchable passes, Mahomes has got his team right in the game, notwithstanding all the pressure, and that's why Mahomes' performance is being lauded, and I know it's on NFL UK's Instagram. You've got people saying, why are you shoving Mahomes down our throats? You can't deny that. You can't deny that the guy, short of those 2 passes being caught, that guy has given his team a chance when he had no right to, really, based on the level of pressure.
Yeah, well, the Chiefs dropped 20 of the 46 passes Mahomes made. Now, obviously, some of them may have been Mahomes' fault, but you could name at least 7 or 8 which were very easy catchable passes. There's no perfect quarterback in the sense of just always getting every single pass completed, unless they've got one of those really nice offensive lines in front of them, like Aaron Rodgers does, or Philip Rivers has at the Colts. So when it comes to those drop passes, it's all on the wide receiver on some of them. I mean, particularly the one where Mahomes was almost lying flat. He was pretty much half a metre off the floor, the entire body side on, and he's thrown it 30 yards, and the guy's jumped up, no pressure on him, hands wide, ready to catch the ball, and it's gone straight through him in the face. It's like, my goodness, it's like, I mean, he's probably going to... he'll get cut at the end of this season, that guy, because you can't be not catching those. It was awful.
I mean, before we kind of dissect the drop passes, because we've got specifics, should we move on to the referees?
Yeah.
And discuss what went on there? Go on, Jack, because you've got some different tweets and all kind of stuff that people have, kind of piped up with after the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Matthew Berry, who's one of the ESPN's senior analysts, said, "I don't have a strong rooting interest in the game or either team." I think was his point. But he said it feels like Tampa Bay are getting all the ticky-tack calls and Kansas City isn't. Doesn't feel like they're calling the same game for both teams, which was, I was getting that vibe, because it's particularly the Tyrann Mathieu one in the end zone. It's like the ball was nowhere near the two of them, and they've gone pass interference. The ball was not even within probably 5-10 metres of them. It was miles away from them, and it was, the referee went, flag, have it.
Well, and the thing was as well, that was a bit of a turn. I think for me that was one of the turning points, because they went from 4th down going for a field goal to it's a yellow flag, automatic first down, and then they get a touchdown. That's not just in terms of the score, but mentally that must be so frustrating, because you've held them to 4th down. There you go for a field goal, and you go, all right, we'd rather not lose the points, but we'll take 3 rather than 7. And then all of a sudden the referee makes a decision that's costing you 7 points. Well, a net gain of 4 for them.
It was one of those ones, like we were watching it together with me on, we were on Zoom whilst watching it, and we had a couple of friends who aren't Chiefs fans, and that Matthew call in the end zone, when the replay came up and they showed what they'd given it for, we all went, no chance they give him pass interference for that. Like, it was just so minimal. Like, there's nothing there. But like the our friends who we were watching it with were like, oh my goodness, like that's just not pass interference. I think anybody who claims to enjoy football, or anybody who claims to have watched football for years, which I haven't, but anybody who claims to have any sort of investment in the game or any sort of love of the game would never ever want that to be called pass interference, because you'd be pulling every play back for a penalty if that's the case, wouldn't you? It's just ridiculously soft. Yeah, well,
very soft.
The Rams corner, Jalen Ramsey's an old pro, and he said the flags were ridiculous, and he said Kansas City has no chance if the refs keep this up. Something very, very questionable.
Well, it was getting to the point, wasn't it, where it was almost every play in, I can't remember which quarter it was now, but you were like, it was like flag, and you're just like, this is ridiculous, as in the game is just...
Well, the way the NFL usually does flags and all that is they're usually pretty strict in the regular season, almost to sort of say, this is the law, this is how we're going to officiate it for the season. And when you get to the playoffs, they sort of dial it down a little bit, and they say, okay, we'll give them a bit more free reign. We don't want to be the ones deciding games based on flags. And then for the Super Bowl, usually the mantra is, let them play. You got to give a little bit of the rough and tumble of the game. If someone's holding them a little bit, don't just flag instantly if it's not really dampening how the play's going on. But it just seemed that every single play that was going on in that second quarter, the refs had already decided beforehand yeah, we're going to throw a flag on this one. Like,
well, they were all just niggly as well, weren't they? Like really, really niggly little calls.
Well,
we sound really salty here, by the way.
I have a theory on this.
We sound so salty.
I have a theory. I have a theory to put forward on this, but I think it might be worth Jack going on a little bit about some of the other calls first, because I don't want to interrupt the momentum here.
Well,
okay.
Tyrann Mathieu got the interception in the third quarter, and the ref threw a flag for a holding on Bashaud Breeland, I think, and you could not make it. Like, there was nothing. The guy was just stood next to him, facing him, really close to him, but he wasn't touching him. The ball wasn't near them, and he went, well, Tyrann Mathieu's caught it, and he's gone down, Chiefs get the ball, whatever, and the ref went, nah, flag, that's a hold there. So they go, okay, we'll replay it, so it means Tampa Bay keep the ball. They get them to the fourth down, and they didn't actually call Hardman offside. I put that wrong. They actually called a different guy offside, Hamilton. I can't remember his first name.
Yeah.
They called him offside.
Yeah, because they said that Hardman... Yeah.
Hardman was more offside than Hamilton. But neither of them, you'd looked at it and gone, they're offside. It was... Literally, and what's interesting was the Hamilton guy who got called offside even checked with the ref beforehand to say, am I onside? And he said yes. And then he threw the flag afterwards, which was like, well, what the heck are you doing? You can't go around saying he's onside and then throw a flag to say offside straight after. It's one or the other. So then they get an instant 5 yards, which means back to first down, so they get to carry on that play. And then in that same play, I think... Sorry, I lost my phone. And then, later on in that play, Rob Gronkowski gets a touchdown, and Rob Gronkowski did a false start on it, but the ref doesn't even spot that. It's like...
Well, they called it in commentary, didn't they?
Yeah,
they called it in commentary, like almost immediately. They were like, oh, I'm pretty sure Gronk has false started there. Yeah, and it's surprising, like, by the time you've had a couple of... As in, between those couple of calls there, you've got a lot of points.
That's potentially a 14-point swing.
Yeah.
Like, if the Chiefs get that ball, they could go and score a touchdown. But they don't, and Tampa Bay keeps the ball. The Chiefs hold them to 3 points, and then they throw the flag. So it means they keep the ball again, so there's nothing's happened. Tampa Bay still got the ball. Then they go on and score a touchdown. There were 3 bad calls by the referees in that one play, and it cost 14... There's a net of 14 points lost by the Chiefs there.
Yeah.
Can I put forward my theory?
Go on.
You're going to have to stick with me on this a little bit, but I'll get there in the end, okay? I think it's something to do with the picture or the perception that the officials have, okay? Now, the best analogy I can think of is the scrum in rugby. And there have been plenty of fairly notable examples in the past. Perhaps the one that I remember the best was when Wales played England in 2013, Six Nations finale, where the referee comes to a conclusion on what he feels is happening in the scrum. And what happens from that point, or what the trend seems to be from that point in the match, is if he perceives that one team is the team that's going forward, all of the 50-50 calls, or the majority of the ones that are really close, and you think, oh, I'm not sure who's infringed there, I'm not sure if it's, this team or that team, the marginal calls tend to go the way of the team that the referee has built up a picture in his head of being the dominant team. Okay? Now, whilst a lot of the penalties given against the Chiefs were very harsh, not all of them were. And I do think, this might be a bit of a general statement, and I love the Chiefs, they're my team. I do think that the Chiefs' defence has got a bit of a holding problem. And I have thought that for a lot of this season. And as good a defender as I think Bashaud Breeland is, I think he quite often is the one who seems to get showed up with it. And I wonder whether...
Caught up with him a bit?
Pardon?
It's caught up with him a bit?
Yeah, well, I just wonder whether the officials...
Past reputation precedes him?
Yeah, I mean, surely... Well, I don't know, but I'm sure that officials going into a game as big as the Super Bowl would see tape of the teams that are going into the Super Bowl, like what to watch out for. Again, a rugby analogy. You know, one of the rugby referees came up this weekend and said, "Oh, you know, as international referees, when we know what teams are playing, we kind of chat with other referees to know what to look out for, because we know that certain teams will try and be sneaky and gain an advantage this way, and then we'll have that in our head going into the match. I'm going to watch out for this." And I'd be amazed if you know, American football referees didn't do the same thing for a match as big as the Super Bowl. So have those officials watch tape and concluded before the match. Do you know what? If you watch the tape, if you watch the Chiefs over the regular season, they're quite often caught holding, which I think they are. And then it's almost as if they're subconsciously looking for it straight away. So because it's in their head, or we're going to watch for holding here, it's the Chiefs. They're quite often caught for holding. You know, Breland, keep an eye on him. He's been caught holding a lot in the regular season. Look, it's end zone. They're under pressure. Let's watch for holding, and then they give. Or pass interference, and then they give that one against Matthew. When, you know, I wonder whether if it's a different team, it's not given, or if it's a different player, it's not given. And I wonder whether that meant that the really soft ones, or the really marginal ones, where you've got one commentator saying, "Oh, you know, there might be enough there," and the other commentator saying, "No, like that's not pass interference for me," they were all going against the Chiefs. And I wonder whether it's something to do with the perception of the Chiefs' defence. That might be slightly harsh, but
it could be, but at the same time, I don't think referees, good referees anyway, should go into any game with those sort of connotations in their mind. Like, if you're a good referee, you judge every play equally, not with any bias or not with any preconception. Because otherwise, you get what happens in, say, football, for example, where quite often you'll find that one team's dominating the other, or perhaps getting a few of the calls, but if they're getting those calls because they're playing the correct way, it's that you can't, just because the crowd's getting on your back as a referee, then start to give some the other way to sort of even it out. It's like, if one team's playing the correct way and they're just doing it, you can't almost, as a multiplier or a snowball effect, you going, "Oh, well, I did it before, they do it again." You know, a good referee should go, "Hang on, that's absolute nonsense." It's like, "I'll pick up that flag because that wasn't a hold." Because the too many of them happen in that game for those referees. Like, if referees are going into a Super Bowl game, and to be fair, Super Bowl referee lineups, usually what happens throughout the season is you have officiating crews, and those crews will stick together for all of the regular season. But when it gets to the Super Bowl, it's like an all-star cast of referees, and these guys don't work together for the rest of the season. They're just sort of the best for each, you know, for whatever, because each referee has like a different position it works on. So like one guy will just always look at the quarterbacks, and he'll, you know, that'll be his job, and the same thing will happen for a few. But when it comes to the Super Bowl, because they don't have those sort of connections with each other, I don't think they've almost got the confidence to go to the other one and say, "No, I don't think that was." They almost go, "Well, you saw it, we'll give it." And it's like, you just can't get away with that sort of mentality in a Super Bowl. It's like you just pick the best crew and let them do it, rather than just picking an all-star group of them who don't have the same mindset on things, because then you get people looking for different things, and it's like, well, usually an entire crew will be maybe a little bit more lenient on one aspect or another, but when you've got all of them who are lenient on some things and harsh on other, they're all going to pick up different players. Like, they may all be looking at one player at one point and going, "Oh, well, for him, and him, they don't see anything wrong with that, but this one, because he came from that crew, thinks that's bad, so he's going to throw a flag." And it's like, it just doesn't let the game flow as much. But yeah, that's all I've got really to say on it.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. But I mean, you know, as in moving on to the, you know, I think we've said our thing about the referees, but, you know, as in moving on to the drop passes, we've kind of touched on this already. But, you know, despite Mahomes not having much time on the ball, not having much time to throw the ball, I should say, and you know, the deep defence doing very well for the Buccaneers. Excuse me. There were chances for the Chiefs, and we didn't take them. Simple as that, you know, as in, like you said, yeah, as in, you know, you're not expecting them, like, all chances to be taken, you know, that's not how sport works, but as in, like you say, Mahomes is, like, mid-air, Superman in it, throws it, and is hitting Williams, in like, on his helmet.
Yeah.
Like, in a Super Bowl, like, you've got to be catching those. You know, and the Chiefs just didn't do it. So, for me, like, if you were to kind of summarise the game, you know, you've got a combination of things. Well, it's like you said already, and you've got the offensive line was struggling. from the Chiefs' perspective. You've got little niggly calls that didn't go in Chiefs' favour. You've got drop passes. You've got a Patrick Mahomes who, is struggling in terms of mobility because of his turf toe. And then just to kind of put the final nail in the coffin, you had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who turned up and I think put in a very good defensive performance, really. As in, I get what you're saying about the offensive line, but the Buccaneers played what was in front of them, and they played it very well, I thought. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm wrong there, or?
I think you're right.
I think you're right too.
Yeah, it was just the culmination of all of it.
It was the perfect storm.
Yeah.
It was the perfect storm from the perspective of the Chiefs. And just to put it out there, we may sound a little bit salty, but at the end of the day, we're Chiefs fans, so we're just talking from a Chiefs perspective. If you're a Buccaneers fan, who knows? We may have somebody who's listening in Tampa. Am I right in saying we have some people who listen in America, Jack? Have I made that up?
We have some in Texas. We have some in... Oh, there were some bizarre places. I was thinking, this is great. It's like, I don't know how on earth that's gone out there. But
who knows? If you're listening and you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, perhaps if you're watching on YouTube, put a comment down below and tell us if you think we're being unfair on the referees, whether you think the Buccaneers deserve a bit more credit than what we're giving them.
I wouldn't say we're being salty, and I think we've given credit to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay played very, very well, and the Chiefs had a banged up offensive line. The Buccaneers played the best against the Chiefs out of anybody this season, but I'd say absolutely. quite convincingly. So, I don't think we're taking anything away from Tampa Bay, and certainly not taking anything away from Tom Brady either. I think. All we're saying is you can't look at that match and say, therefore Brady is better than Mahomes. Doesn't work.
No. It
doesn't work. Some matches work like that,
realistically,
but this was a match that just did not work like that.
The thing is, as well, and if you look at that game, if you do compare Brady and Mahomes, you look at that game, and anyone who knows anything about NFL would look at that game and go, it's not that Mahomes had a bad game.
No.
Like, you just look at what he did as an individual, and... you can't come to that conclusion. And that's not taken away from what Brady did. Brady was very good, but you can't say because Brady won and the Bucs dominated, therefore Patrick Mahomes was bad. It's not quite as simple as that.
Yeah, and
there we are. Sorry, go on.
Well, one last note to end. Brady was very good, and Brady was pretty much error free. I think, but probably error free full stop. But you rewind to the NFC Championship match against the Packers, and Brady throws 3 picks, and the Packers don't make him pay for it. Okay, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden Tom Brady is rubbish, but
no, of course not.
sometimes quarterbacks make mistakes and their team digs them out, or they make mistakes and the opposition doesn't make them pay. This time Mahomes put in a performance that. Should have yielded more points than it did because he was let down by receivers, but ultimately he didn't have a platform to win, and that's all there is to it.
Jack, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
NFL-wise? Not at all. There we are. I'm just putting it out there. I've just thought, in the intro to this podcast, did I say episode 13?
No, 14.
I can't remember.
It was definitely 14 because I was sat back as a listener.
Well, if I did say episode 13, it's not episode 13, it's episode 14. Anyway, should we do our highlights of the week?
Yes.
Jack, do you want to kick us off?
I shall. My highlight of the week, despite not really being this week, I think it was like a day after our last one finished.
Probably.
Man United beating Southampton 9-0. I loved it. It was nice because it came
United
just
fan
after,
enjoys comprehensive United win.
It was nice because it came after the
be...
Sheffield United loss, and it was like,
yes,
that's what we needed.
No, that's understandable. Josh, do you want to do your highlight next? Because my highlight kind of leads on to the next topic.
Yep, my highlight of the week was Lewis Hamilton signing a new contract with Mercedes in Formula 1.
It's been kind of a long time coming, really.
Yeah, it has been. And the reason is very simple. I think right now he's the best driver in the sport, and I think it would be a loss to the sport. Drivers tend to tail off towards the end of their career. Hamilton hasn't hit that point yet for me, even though he's what, he's turning 30, he's just turned 36, I think, maybe. Yeah, he just hasn't hit that point whatsoever. And the main reason is that it means we might see sporting history at the end of the season, because if he wins the World Championship this season, it'll be his 8th, and that'll mean that he is outright the driver who has won the most World Championships in history. And I think whatever the sport, a bit of history like that is worth watching.
Fair enough. That's a very valid reason for having it as your highlight of the week. My highlight of the week was Dupont's try for France versus Italy, because it was just a bit of silk, really. It was really, really, really smartly finished. And on that note, we're going to do a week, kind of like a review of the weekend Six Nations fixtures. We'll start off with Italy versus France. This is a spoiler warning. If you don't know the results, you've had long enough to see them. It's Thursday now. You should probably know that at this point, the teams for the next game have been announced. So if you don't know the results, that's your fault, not mine. But this is a spoiler warning if you haven't. The score, Italy versus France, was 10-50 in France's favour. Obviously, I don't think anyone was expecting Italy to win this game.
I wasn't expecting to score 50 points, no.
No. Yeah. Not forget win. Just the number of points it means that it wasn't Italy winning. As in, like we said, don't think anyone really expected Italy to win. I think what will perhaps concern a lot of the other teams in the tournament was the nature of the performance. As in,
to be
quite
honest,
often teams go on.
I was.
No,
it was sort of going on to the next point as well at the same time. But I thought they were so bad, like so bad, and they no longer even have that sort of novelty element to them that they have Sergio Parisse. It's like now that he's not even there, it's kind of just like there's literally no reason to watch Italy play rugby. They are far behind everybody else.
We'll discuss this in a minute, but I think the teams quite often come up against Italy, and they dominate the game, but they often don't always put that many points on the board. Like Wales have done that so many times. Like Wales, in the past have dominated against Italy and scored like less than 30 points. Which really, when you look at the gulf in quality between them, it should probably be more. Basically, the majority of the time that France got into the 22, into the danger zone, they scored points, which you can't ask for more than that, really, from France's perspective. Kind of touching on what you said already, Jack, as in, after the game, Sam Warburton, and it surprised me, actually, because Sam Warburton is normally fairly, not neutral, but he's not quite as strong in his argument about this sort of thing, but like he strongly suggested that it was time for the Six Nations to introduce a promotion relegation system, because Italy are just so bad. I mean, for me, there's a point to this where I think, well, it's not like it's a new thing. Italy have been pretty bad rugby-wise for a long time now. So it surely, for me, if you were going to change it, you would have changed it already. But as it really got to a point, now that players, like you say, Jack, Parisse have gone, does it kind of get to a point now where you look at it and you go, no, something needs to change?
But do you not think
what are your thoughts
on
this?
The side of the coin is that teams like Georgia are genuinely quite good now? Because he did mention that there's almost a glass ceiling on the second tier of the, because they have their own competition that the Georgia have with a couple of other nations. And it's like, well, you never know how good those nations are until you get to a World Cup. No. Because that's the only opportunity you'll ever have to play them, unless you play them in a friendly or something. Or
the problem is that I may be wrong on this, but I feel like every time that Georgia have played, like, say, a Wales or an Italy in, like, autumn internationals or anything like that, they've not really done anything that makes you think, actually, do you know what, Georgia deserve a chance.
Yeah, but to be fair, at the same time, teams, they won't have been used to it, in a sense. It's like, when Georgia came up, they were like, whoa, they were almost shocked by the high quality. So you give them a couple of years to actually get used to the system, and they go, oh, you know what, we can actually, it takes a little bit, they've got to get into the speed of it, you know what I mean?
I agree with you, but then is there not the danger that Georgia will, say for example this year they introduced it, Italy get relegated, Georgia come up, next year Georgia just immediately get relegated because they haven't had like years to build on it. As in, what we've got to consider here is that, okay, yes, Italy are poor, but they've been in the Six Nations for a long time, and I think Italy have improved. As in, like, you know, I say improved in compared to what they have been. They are a better team, I think, but that's taken time. So, if you have a promotion relegation system, is there not just the danger that you're going to have, basically, with the greatest respect, you're just going to have Italy and Georgia yo-yoing up and down every year?
No, because the way you suggested it was that maybe even have a playoff game. So Georgia,
that's true.
You know, as Italy are the team which has played in the Six Nations for longer, Georgia would travel to Italy, so Italy have some sort of advantage, and they play them. Winner gets to stay up, and it's like the winner of the bottom one against the last place at the top. Because otherwise, you may have one of those seasons where it's gone horrifically bad, you know, for an England, for instance, and they finished bottom because Georgia are amazing.
Well, I remember there was one year where I'm pretty sure France finished bottom one year.
Go. And it's like, well, obviously that team's better than Georgia, but they'll have that playoff game, so it's not just a straight swap. Because otherwise, you do run the risk of one of the better nations going down because somebody has to. So having that playoff maybe still at least keeps the sort of integrity or the competitivity to it, and rather than just having a sort of Sixth Nation for the sake of Six Nations. Firstly, do you think there should be Six Nations? Do you think either, do you think Georgia even deserves to come up, or even Italy deserves to stay? Do you not think they should go trim the fat, let's go back down to 5?
I think it should be Six Nations. Just because I don't think it serves rugby to be reducing the Six Nations. I don't think it serves rugby to be tightening up the pool of teams that, the Six Nations is a huge competition, and it's very, very popular. I think it's in rugby's interests to grow as a sport, and I think in order to do that, they need to have a willingness to let teams like Italy or like Georgia be in the Six Nations, even if it does mean that they're more than likely to finish bottom in any given year. Italy or Georgia or teams like them are only going to get better by being in the Six Nations, aren't they? They're not, if Italy drop out of the Six Nations, then they're not going to improve. Everybody wants Italy to be good enough to compete. Now, the qualifying argument there is, well, like Jack Slade said, Italy have had 21 years in the Six Nations now, and they look no closer to winning it now than they did in 2000. So can you just allow a team to be there because you want to grow the sport and because you want them to be competitive if ultimately they're not competitive? And yeah, when Sam Warburton made the argument on the weekend, for the first time I thought, yeah, do you know what, I agree with him. I do think there should be promotion and relegation. And it's not because I've been against that idea in the past. I just think I would have thought, is it necessary? Whereas I think it is. I think,
because otherwise you do run the risk of damaging the reputation of the Six Nations as a competition.
Yeah, as a prestige competition.
When you look at other sports, say the NFL, nobody respects the NFC East at the moment because they're all rubbish. Nobody respects the French league in football because there's only one good team. You almost damage the reputation of that club, and it'll always be that sort of. Obviously, it's not quite the same as the Six Nations because the other 5 are actually genuinely pretty tight and pretty good. But you do run the risk that when you just have teams there for the sake of having teams there, someone might even argue it just damages Italy's confidence to the point that they may play worse rugby. Maybe Italy would be better off joining this B tier of the Six Nations in a sense.
I just think.
I mean, there's another hypothetical that I want to add into this as well. For example, if speaking about the home nations now, so excluding France for a minute, if say for example Wales were to get relegated, let me put it this way. Say, for example, Wales got relegated last year. They had a pretty poor tournament last year, didn't they? Imagine Wales got relegated. This year, we're going into a Lions year. At the moment, the Lions is going ahead. We're going into a Lions year, and Wales as a nation is not represented in the top tier of international rugby. Is that how does that work? Is that something we just go, well, Wales should have been better?
Yeah.
As in you've probably got a few Welsh players in that team who, are above average compared to the rest of the squad, and just purely on the basis of, well, I say purely on the basis of a relegation system, which has never been the case in the past, they lose out on potentially going on a Lions tour.
Well, I don't think they have to. I think, the Lions coach knows he's got 4 nations to pick from, and he picks the best 4 players that he thinks he can from those 4 nations. That's why, when whoever it is, like Gatland or McGeechan or Woodward or Henry, I can't go back any further than that. Telfer, that's why coaches sometimes pick players to go to the Lions who aren't necessarily starting for the international side. You remember in the Lions tour in 2017, Gatland took Jamie George but left Dylan Hartley at home, and Jamie George started all 3 tests. Well, Jamie George was sat on England's bench up until then, but Gatland says, well, no, he's the player I want to start for the Lions. So the Lions coach, say Wales were to get relegated, or Scotland or England or Ireland were to get relegated, well, the Lions coach still knows he can pick players on their individual merit from those countries.
And to be fair,
it would just be a very interesting dynamic.
Even being in the Six Nations doesn't guarantee you spaces. I mean, Scotland have been massively underrepresented in the Six Nations, even though they've been pretty good for the last few years. And it's like, so I don't feel like it's gonna go one way straight away. But in a sense, why would they want to pick Welsh players if the Wales team got relegated? I do feel you will get picked if you play well. I mean, I haven't got too much more to add on to it.
But no, and it might be that if one of the teams gets relegated, they will more than likely have the least representatives going on a Lions tour. You might have a few in there who you think, they're being let down by their team. But if Scotland go on and win a Grand Slam this year, you'd expect the players to dominate the Lions squad, and rightly so.
But my argument to that would be, and I completely agree with what you're saying, is that if a coach really has knowledge of the game, they don't pick their Lions team based purely on the Six Nations. But if you look at 2013, a lot of the players that went on the Lions tour were Welsh players. For me, those players played their way into a Lions tour because of that one game against England at the end. Imagine that Wales team hadn't been in that Six Nations. All of a sudden, the whole... And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I'm just putting hypotheticals out. All of a sudden, that Lions team, Jamie Roberts, George North, Lee Halfpenny, Alex Cuthbert, for example, they're not going. They're not going on the Lions tour, potentially.
And
because
the flip side
in
of
the other games... Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, the flip side of what you're saying is that Wales players played themselves into the Lions squad on one performance. I think Gatland went on record as saying that part of the reason why he barely picked any Scottish players, I think he only took Tommy Seymour and Stuart Hogg, didn't he? I think it was possibly only the two.
Something like that. Or Maitland, maybe?
Possibly.
But
he went on record as saying the performance that played Scotland players out of a Lions jersey was when they went to Twickenham and had 60 points put on them. And his reasoning was, well, they haven't travelled well. They've gone to, Twickenham. Twickenham's a fortress. England were playing very, very well. But I'm picking these players to go and play New Zealand in their own backyard. So if they can't stand up to a test at Twickenham, how are they going to stand up to a test the other side of the world, where New Zealand are unbeaten at Eden Park for I don't know how many years? And, I'm wanting players who've been hammered 60 points to 15 or 20 or whatever it was at Twickenham to then go and perform for the Lions at, the other side of the world. And Gatland felt, whether people agree with this, I'm sure a lot of Scottish people wouldn't agree with it, but Gatland felt that told him all he needed to know about the minerals of a lot of those Scottish players. Fast forward to now.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Fast forward to now, that's probably not the case. Well, it isn't the case. Scotland have gone to Twickenham and won last weekend. But yeah, no, I completely buy what you're saying, that one performance or, a couple of weekends in the Six Nations can change an entire group's fortunes. But I think I would just come back to, well, if Wales got relegated, well then, that's nobody's fault but Wales, is it? Or if Scotland got relegated, or Ireland got relegated, or England got relegated, but you go, well, okay, we can probably, if it were Wales, you'd say, well, okay, we probably don't expect many of our players to make up the Lions squad, because if we got relegated in the Six Nations, are those same players going to go to South Africa and beat them in a test series? Probably not.
Even when you've got guys like Sergio Parisse at Italy, even though he's played on a bad team, it's like, I don't know if he's quite the quality of the Lions squad. I don't know how you compare him with them.
At his peak, he would have got in, absolutely.
But that's what I mean. So you still identify good players even when they're not playing, or even when they're getting bad. So I think it goes back and forth both ways. But
yeah, you're right. You are right. Yeah, and I mean, I guess the thing is as well, as in the counter argument to what I said could be, well, it's not a case of Wales have been rubbish for that Six Nations and then they were immense in that way, that one game and Gatland picked them. They were still in the tournament up until that point, and then that was just like a really good performance just to kind of tip it over the edge. So, like you said, Jack, you could argue it back and forth, I guess. I was just putting it as hypotheticals. Perhaps let us know what you think.
Of course.
Should there be a relegation promotion system in the Six Nations? Perhaps put a comment down below. Or no, if you've seen if you've seen it on Facebook where it's been shared by Jack or myself, put a comment. Let us know what you think.
I think part of the reason that,
because I think it's interesting, it's really interesting.
I think part of the reason there always has been, a clear reluctance on the part of the Six Nations to introduce promotion relegation is, like you say, it introduces a level of peril to the non-Italies of the Six Nations. Yeah. So you go back to last year's tournament. Wales finished 5th with 1 win from 5. They were only 1 match better than Italy. Italy finished bottom with 0 wins from 5. But Wales beat Italy in the first match, and that was Wales's only win. So last season, the only thing that separated Wales from Italy was the match between Wales and Italy, and then they both lost to everybody else. So, I understand the home nations and France not wanting relegation, but I just think for the good of the sport, it needs to happen. And like you say, if Wales then finish bottom. I'm not picking on Wales. I'm Welsh. I'm only using them as an example because they're our team. But say Wales
were how unbiased we are.
Yeah, 100%. Let's change tack. Say England were to finish bottom, and say England
parties in the streets.
There would be a lot of memes on Twitter, wouldn't there?
I reckon we've just lost like 90% of our 5 viewers there, Jack, by you saying that.
Say England were to finish bottom, well, you'd say, well, okay, it's been a poor campaign. They've only got themselves to blame if they're finishing bottom. But even then, you're giving them a chance to play their way out by putting in a good performance in a playoff. Saying, okay, you finished bottom, so that means that you've got to have Georgia come to Twickenham and play you. And if you beat them, then what I mean is you're weighting it in the favour of the team that's in the Six Nations, aren't you? To the point where, if the underdog, if the team that's seeking promotion comes to your home stadium and beats you there in a playoff match, or win or best, they absolutely deserve to be in the Six Nations at that point. For me, and the more realistic example, if it's Italy and Georgia. Well, if Georgia go to Rome and beat Italy in Rome, when Italy's players know that it is all on this match and Georgia still beat them, well then too right, Georgia should be in the Six Nations and Italy should be relegated. I think the longer that it goes on with Italy just being completely uncompetitive in the Six Nations, like Jack said, the less seriously you can take it as a really competitive competition.
Top tier tournament, yeah. Well, there we are, Sam Warburton. We know you probably don't listen, but if you are, we agree with you. On that note, England versus Scotland. What a game.
Scotland's first win in Twickenham since when?
38 years, I believe.
Yeah.
I think it's 1983.
Love a nice little stat like that.
So, that's... do you know what? I should have had that as my start of the week.
Missed opportunity.
That's annoying. I forgot about that one. Here we are. There you go, there's an extra start of the week for you. It was a pretty...
11-6?
Yeah. It was a tight game.
I knew it was tight. I didn't quite realise that they combined for just 17 points. Well, this is the thing.
Points. So Scotland started the game better. They didn't really assert their dominance, as in they had a good start, but didn't really put the points on the board to demonstrate that. Then, after Scotland didn't really put the points on the board, it looked like England was starting to kind of creep back into the game. But England's ill-discipline, it was ridiculous. As in, England conceded 15 penalties compared to Scotland's 6, and it just meant they weren't able to kind of get a base in the game. And I always remember Sean Edwards saying, I can't remember whether it was on a Lions documentary or it was an article I read or something like that, but he said if you have
more than 10, wasn't it? If you're in double figures
if you
for the
have
match.
more than 10, exactly, you can basically write off an international game if you're having more than 10 penalties.
Yeah,
if
you're unlikely to win.
Yeah, even if, say, for example, 5 of those penalties are within kicking distance, that's 15 points. That's over 2 tries. So when you're conceding that many penalties, you're always gonna struggle. I don't know about you, but I feel like Eddie Jones's tinkering is like. Do you reckon it's starting to catch up with England a little bit? The constant moving around of people.
I don't know. I've spoken to friends about the Six Nations this weekend, and I know we're going to talk about other results after this, but I said, thinking of fans from the home nations, as a Welsh fan and as a Welshman, I'm chuffed that Wales have got to win, and that's pretty much the sum total of my feelings.
Simple as that.
If I were Irish, then I would be gutted because I'd feel that my team had put in a good enough performance with 14 men to suggest that with 15 men we could have won that match, probably would have won that match. If I was Scottish, I'd be elated. If I were English, I'd just be baffled. I'd just be completely, what? It was just such a nothing performance. And okay, England have got injuries in the tight 5, haven't they? They're missing both of their starting props, and you've got a number of second rows out as well. But that shouldn't lead to an abject 15-man performance like the one we watched England put in against Scotland. Taking nothing away from Scotland, Scotland was superb, absolutely fantastic, and they were a joy to watch as a neutral.
The only thing you could criticise Scotland for is that they
weren't
score
clinical
enough
enough.
points
Yeah,
relative to how good they were.
100%. They should have won by much more. But that's a small fix for Scotland. The little things cost them points. The fundamentals were spot on. So if you're Scottish, you look. If you're Scottish, you're looking at this championship, and I know you can't call Grand Slam predictions after one match, but surely Scotland haven't had a better chance in the last 20 years. Surely not. After that performance away at Twickenham, the only thing, the caveat for Scotland is they've got to go to Paris. But
the thing is though, is that if they can, because it's Scotland-Wales this weekend. If Scotland can win against Wales, I think that puts them in a good position. Really,
brilliant position.
I think that puts them in a really good position. As in.
But
I think Scotland were really good. Really, really good.
Back to England, I'm not sure you can put it down to the change of personnel. And the reason I say that is because...
it's solely that, but...
No, I think, England have got a bigger player pool than Ireland, Scotland and Wales put together. So England have got depth, as in...
And they're stealing Welsh players. The Vunipolas, as I mentioned last week,
we've got to be we've got to be careful there though, because we've got a fair few. Nick Tompkins.
We're allowed to. We're a smaller nation. We're already taking scraps. They're taking pretty much 90% of our players.
I'm pretty sure Johnny Williams was.
Johnny Williams was another one.
Some English.
Ross Moriarty played England under 20s.
There's a picture of Ross Moriarty playing for England under 20s in an England shirt,
with Nick Tompkins, same team.
With Nick Tompkins. Yeah.
Anyway, what I mean is England have always like George Ford plays fly half, and then for a while they kind of revert to Farrell at fly half, and then George Ford comes back in, and like George Ford's whole career has kind of been a bit like that. Do you know what I mean? He's kind of had
George Ford's playing this weekend for England,
but that could kind of be translated across most of their team. Like Manu Tuolangi is, I'm not English, but if I were English, then if you were to say, right, no injuries, no baggage, who's the best centre you've got? Well, okay, Farrell is a kind of pseudo-centre, isn't he? He's a centre and a fly-half. Tuolangi's got to be their best, or one of their best. But, he's so often injured that you actually... How often have we seen Manu Tuolangi play consistently for more than 4 or 5 games at his best over the last few years? Not often. So, I don't know. I don't think it's just the personnel. I think England last year won matches without playing well. which there's nothing wrong with. There are times where in any sport you have to do that, and actually that can be a mark of a good team, is that you still, you grind out wins when you're not playing well. I do think that perhaps their results last year papered over cracks, and that, those cracks, there's an over-reliance on kicking game, even in attacking positions. A couple of times on Saturday, in good attacking positions, they're looking for grubber kicks in behind, which, okay, there's nothing wrong with, but, on percentage, with the ball carriers England have got, I think there's an over-reliance on that kind of, turning the opposition. It's not that they shouldn't do it, but I think that they're too far weighted in that direction. And I think for whatever reason, the creativity has dried up. Now, if you rewind to the 2019 World Cup, which is only 15 months ago, not that far back, England put in a string of performances, not right the way through the group stage, but particularly the Australia match in the quarters and the New Zealand match in the semis, where they were superb and free flowing. Do you know what I mean? As in, you looked at their kind of back play and they just looked like they were going to score. They looked like they were going to score a try every time they had possession inside the opposition's 10-metre line. They had they had the physical grunt, I guess, to get go forward ball and get momentum. And as soon as they had momentum, they looked borderline unstoppable. They don't look remotely like that anymore.
Well, no, they've already scored 6 points, and that's 6 points against Scotland. France gave up 10 points to Italy, and France is coached defensively by Sean Edwards, who's a genius. So England have got some real problems going on, yeah. If Italy can outscore them against a harder defensive team, what hope do they have? Wooden spoon.
Love that.
Get it out.
Love that.
I think a lot will become clear in England's matches over the next couple of weekends.
Yes.
England, when I say if I were an English fan I'd be baffled, I would be baffled at that type of performance, because if you can't, they just look flat, and if you can't get yourself up for England-Scotland, well, what can you get yourself up for? And you had players in there with a point to prove, because you've got a few players in that type 5 who probably wouldn't usually be starters, like players like Addis Genge, Will Stewart. Well, you'd think they'd really want to put their hand up. But I'm going on and on here. Another interesting thing was that Scotland physically bullied England, physically outmuscled them. And that has always been such a core of England's game that, okay, even when, perhaps they're grinding out wins, they're grinding, they kick. They've always kind of at least had parity in that physical battle against everybody, as far as I can see, over the last 3 or 4 years, apart from South Africa in the World Cup final. But Scotland went there and outmuscled them. It wasn't, that England had the, the grunt and Scotland had the creativity. Scotland had both. So yeah, England are on a bit of a hide into nothing this week now, because, they've got Italy at Twickenham. So England... And, after what France did to Italy on the weekend, England fans, if I were an England fan, I'm wanting a 40-point win, at least. And if it's anything under 30, that's really not a particularly satisfying result against an Italy side this poor. I can't even get my mind to a place where I can imagine England losing at home to Italy. Therefore,
it's not going to happen.
If England do beat them by 50, people will say, "Oh well, it's Italy." So England can't win this week. England could put 60 on them, and people will say, "Oh, so what?" People are hardly going to say, "Oh, therefore England have got their mojo back," because Italy at the moment aren't seen as credible opposition in the Six Nations. So, yeah, it's a strange one, I think, for England.
There we are.
I'm trying not to sound too gleeful about it.
Final game of the weekend, Wales versus Ireland.
That was a very,
21-16.
very fun game to watch. I will say that.
It was a lot going on. Perhaps the shock of the weekend in terms of Six Nations. As in, I certainly wasn't expecting that as a result as a Welshman. I guess, like Josh has said previously, the thing that mattered for Wales was the result. Simple as that. Didn't matter how we got it. Ireland played the majority of the game with a man less, and I believe that Omani's now received a 2-week ban or something like that.
To be fair, it was a bad challenge. That was a bad challenge.
Shoulder to the face.
And interestingly, he did the exact same thing for Munster against the Scarlets this season. The exact same thing. Mansour just scored a try, and literally within a split second of his teammate grounding the ball, his teammate had been tackled over the line. Omani did exactly that. Flew in, shoulder tucked, no attempt to wrap or legitimately clear out. And Omani actually got a red card after they gave the try because the ball had already been grounded, but they then sent him off anyway. So he's got a bit of form and recent form for it as well. You're talking, it was October, I think. So
what worried me was that the ref didn't spot it. He said, "No, clean takeout." And, I mean, when I saw it, I thought his head is pressed up against one guy's jersey, like the back of his head was against his sort of body, and Omani's gone with his shoulder, and it's absolutely nowhere this head is going, so it's just going to get crushed between the two. And it's like, I wonder if you look at that going, yeah, that's good.
There is something I think about this though, and I'm not defending Omani, but I remember, even when I was playing rugby in school, so that's not exactly a high level, and that wasn't particularly long ago, believe it or not. But I remember when I was in school, you were coached to hit the ruck and hit the ruck hard. It's as simple as that. As in, you hit the ruck and you clear out the man who's in front of you. Now, bearing in mind, Peter Omani is a man who is, he's going towards the end of his career, isn't he? So I think it's fair to say that.
Mm-hmm.
I think perhaps there's an element of, I don't think he did it with intention.
No,
I think it was almost like he just reverted to type in hit ruck hard, and it just so happened that there was a head there.
I don't know. I feel like he was there for a while, long enough that someone could have spotted it. But I don't think he was targeting. It did seem like.
No. I think I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think. Trying to get inside Omani's head, I think he's probably frustrated that Francis is where he is. I think he's probably just thinking, "Oh, roll away, mate. You're just trying to slow our ball down, whatever." Or he's the wrong side. But it's a cheap shot. I think Francis has already been half cleared out. He sat there, and the commentators made a good point at half time. What Omani should have done is focused on clearing out Tipperick, because Tipperick was literally just tucked in slightly behind, slightly next to Francis, and Tipperick was legitimately challenging for the ball. So Omani really needed to see past Francis and go and try and clear out Tipperick, because he was live, whereas Francis is, Francis has been cleared out. He's off his feet. So, I just think a player of that experience. I agree. I don't think it was I don't think it was. I'm struggling to think of the word. I don't think it was premeditated. There he is. Right, I'm gonna hurt him. I think it was a bit of a cheap shot. Francis isn't in a position to compete for the ball. Francis is already kind of half sat down. But in rugby nowadays, the head is just. It's just a no-go zone, and no matter how good a player you are, it's slightly brainless to go flying in like that when there's the slightest possibility that you're going to hit their head, because it's an instant red card. Instant. There's no. And Wayne Barnes, when he was told to go back and look at it, he on TV, he spoke through his reasoning, and it was very, very simple. He was like, right, shoulder is tucked, or arm is tucked, so contact is with the shoulder. He's coming at force, he's coming at speed, his eyes are turned away, so it's reckless, and contact to the head, red card, simple. And there's no grey area of, is that harsh? So nowadays, as a professional player, just don't do it. Ultimately, rewind 10 years, he's not getting red carded for it. But nowadays, I feel like it's been quite a while now since this start. In the 2019 World Cup, there was that talk of there's been more red cards in this World Cup than ever before, more yellows than ever before. Players have got to learn, haven't they? Players have got to learn, and as hard as it might be to override your natural instinct to, right, I got to clear him out. It's like, yeah, but clear out. Clear out is you got to get him out of the breakdown, but. Referees and the laws of the game are quite clear on what is a legal clear out. And so, if Omani is looking at him and thinking, I've got to clear him out, well, don't go flying in with your shoulder, when he's sat down and there's even the slightest chance that you could hit him in the head. So, yeah, and it's not the first time. You'd think he would have learned his lesson on that earlier this season, a player of that experience. But there we go. It's cost Ireland as well. Cost Ireland badly.
Yeah, definitely. Cost Island badly. I mean, just briefly going back to Wales, because we'll move on to Ireland in a moment. I think for Wales there was a significant improvement in their defence compared to the Six Nations last year.
Agreed.
And
the autumn.
I think they made themselves... Yeah, and just on the pure basis of they were just a lot tougher in defence. As in, like, in the autumn you were looking at it and going, this is just so soft. As in, we're not winning collisions like we used to. Whereas against Ireland, I thought it was a lot more comprehensive.
I feel like they were. You could see flaws in Wales' system throughout last year. Like there seemed to be a lot of times we were caught very narrow last year's Six Nations as well, and it was satisfying to see. Not so much that it was world-beating defence, but that we were coherent. That we were hard to break down, which I think should be a bare minimum for an international side nowadays.
Yeah, I mean there were points to. Like for example, Wales struggled with ball retention. Is this part of the pivot way of playing? They seem to be every time there's like a little opportunity or a little half chance, they take it, which personally I think is a little bit naive on an international level. Sometimes you have just got to take the ball into contact, hit the ground, recycle, which Wales at the moment don't seem to be able to do particularly well. It seems like every time the ball comes out, you got people trying to get their arms around and pop it off, which at points is good because you want a bit of creativity, but not at the expense of solidity and effectiveness, I guess. I feel like at some point, if that carries on, the Wales are going to be caught out a little bit.
Yeah, I think there was a period in the first half. I don't know whether it was. I think it was before the Omani red card. Yeah, it was definitely before the Omani red card. And I think it was the only, perhaps there's one or two others, but it was the main memory I have of the match. The main memory I have from the match of Wales really going through phases. And they looked very good. I've been, as I think most probably Welsh rugby fans have been over the last year, been, fairly open about, how the transition from Gatland's era to Pivac's has not been smooth. But I thought with the ball in hand, Wales looked very, very good. The issue for me on the weekend was that we just didn't do it enough. As in, Ireland were able to retain the ball very easily. I don't think we competed hard enough on the floor. And there were errors as well. But the biggest problem for me on the weekend was the set piece. One in the good column was that the scrum looked really, really solid, which was pleasing because Ireland had got a very good scrum. And in the early stages, it looked like we kind of had parity, and then a few scrums in the second half, it looked like we actually got a bit of a shove on them. Not that we gained penalties from it; they were able to recycle, but it looked like we had a little bit of momentum in the scrum. That was a good thing because when we went to Dublin in the autumn, they demolished our scrum.
Absolutely.
So that was positive. The lineup was anything but positive, and that cost us the chance to get any sort of foothold for any sort of length of time for the majority of the match. But I thought when Wales went through phases, I thought there was a good balance of wanting to get the ball wide, but also not just aimlessly throwing wide. It's cliche, isn't it? But in the right to go wide is the term in rugby, isn't it? But I thought there was a good kind of forward momentum as well, and there was that patch in the first half where we went I think from just inside our own half, marched Ireland back into their 22, and you were looking at it thinking we're just marching them back, and in the end we only got 3 from it. But no, I think the Ireland played well, I think, and were able to retain the ball very well. I think the reason that we obviously had 15, they had 14. The reason that for a long time Ireland was still ahead of us was because we weren't allowing ourselves to get a foothold in the game, and I think the primary reason for that was the lineup. But I thought there were a lot of things that had markedly improved from a Welsh point of view. I wouldn't go as far as saying it was a superb performance. I wouldn't go as far as saying it was a really, really good performance, but I do think it was a vast improvement on where they were at in the autumn. I don't think it's a problem with Pivac's style of play. It's going to take time to transition to the kind of thinking of another coach. and it might just be that Wales are, slightly further along that, that process than they were in the autumn, which is pleasing. So yeah, I guess the other question is, where do Ireland go from here? They've got to beat France this weekend. It's as simple as that, and that's a tough position for Ireland to be in. Given that I thought, their performance, there were a lot of good things about their performance on the weekend. They've now been beaten by an unfancied Welsh team. Let's be honest.
I mean, do you think it's a case of, for Ireland, a case of just execute the same game plan but with 15 men? Do you think it's as simple as that?
I think so. I
would agree.
Yeah, I think that's what they will do, and I think that would have won them the game in Cardiff. I think. Yeah, you can't tell, I think there's a good there's a good argument for saying
I mean, there were large chunks of that game where Ireland held the ball. They looked threatening with a man down after 80 minutes, and Saxon went off with a concussion as well. And let's not forget there was that at the end. I can't remember the substitute 10's name for Ireland.
Say again. Sorry, I missed that.
Anyway, the substitute 10 for Ireland who replaced
Billy Burns.
Saxton. That's it, Billy Burns. He came on. Ireland have a penalty in the last minute of the game to put them right on the 5 metre line, and he kicks it out on the full, and that's the end of the game. So who knows what could have happened if he had hit touch? Could have quite easily been a very different result.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think for Ireland, I think it's a case of execute with 15. Simple as that. And I think Scotland versus Wales is going to be a big game this weekend. Speaking from the Welsh perspective, as in it could outline how the rest of the tournament is going to go. As in, it's one of those things where it's, just it really is just going to determine how it's going to go. As in, in terms of the Lion Tour, you're going to have potentially Scottish players. If it goes in Scotland's favour, could they finally have a strong contingent? Wales, they're trying to build. If they lose to Scotland, is that going to kind of cut their momentum a little bit? We shall see.
The thing with Scotland now is, can they back up what they did this weekend just gone? And I'm not saying that to poke or prod them. Scotland was superb. Scotland were the most impressive performance of the first weekend, as good as France I think are, and even though I still think France are the favourites purely because they play Scotland in Paris, Scotland's performance was by far the standout performance of the first weekend. They've now got to bring, this is the thing, it was the type of performance which, short of the fact they didn't put enough points on the boards, just talking about the performance, that's the type of performance that was, I think was so good, it's difficult to replicate that level of performance again. They might, and if they do, then credit to them, they will deservedly be top of the table at the end of this weekend. There could be an element of, they're unable to bring that performance again. And again, think of England back in the World Cup. England beat New Zealand in the semi-final and they were superb, fantastic. And I remember watching that match and thinking, they were fantastic, really, really good. And then a week later, they just didn't show anything like that type of performance. And, partially because South Africa, kind of got a hold of them physically that New Zealand didn't manage to, but England just didn't really replicate it, and looking back, England played their final a week early, didn't they? They played their final against New Zealand, and then they were unable to play another final the week later. So it'll be interesting to see how Scotland go. Coupled in with that is the fact that the pressure now is on Scotland, because Wales are still unfancied. Wales were unfancied going in against Ireland. I didn't think that Wales were going to beat Ireland. I don't think a lot of Welsh people did think Wales were going to beat Ireland. Certainly no Irish rugby pundits thought that they were going to beat Ireland, and they were all very outspoken about that fact anyway. Because of the Omani red card, Wales haven't really gained any stature from beating Ireland. Wales will go in to the Scotland match completely unfancied, just like they went into the Ireland match completely unfancied, even though they've got to win on the board. And George North's not playing, and Josh Navidi's not playing, and Thomas Williams is not playing, and Johnny Williams is not playing, and
Liam
Josh
Williams
Adams
back,
is
am I
still... Liam Williams is back.
Yeah, Liam Williams is back.
Josh Adams still isn't back. So Wales have got injuries. Lydiate as well.
Bit of an experience in that midfield as well between Tompkins and
John
Watkins.
Because
as well,
Jonathan Davis is still not fit. Johnny Williams is out. George North is out. So I think that area, the centre, is going to be really interesting to watch because that's a pairing that hasn't seen a lot of game time together at all. So Wales are under no pressure whatsoever. Wales will go there. Well, I won't say no pressure whatsoever because Welsh fans still want to see Wales perform.
No expectation.
And Pivac will still be under pressure, but exactly. Wales will go up there unfancied with a load of injuries against a team that played very, very well last weekend.
Yeah, simple as that.
The pressure is on Scotland.
Simple
it would be
as
it would be unthinkable for Scotland to now lose in Murrayfield to Wales after doing what they did last weekend. That would be awful for Scottish rugby.
If Wales did win that, do you think we all of a sudden are on course for quite a very good, a surprisingly good, it says, I know we didn't really set the world alight against Scotland, but, if you can grind it out and just, even if you're never going to batter teams, just grind it out. Nice, big, solid defence, just don't lose. Do you not think...
Well, let's put it this way.
Scotland
Last year... Well, we beat Italy last year, which gave us 1 win. We've already beaten Ireland this year. If we then beat Scotland, you'd assume that we'd beat Italy. So we've already won 3 times as many games this... Yeah, exactly. So
and going into the championship, 3 wins, 2 losses, as a Welsh fan, I would have said, that's not a terrible championship for Wales. Yeah, it's not fantastic, but it's progress, And ultimately, Wales were 1 from 5 last year. They went on a run of 5 or 6 losses in a row going into last autumn and, progressing through the autumn. So, a 3 from 5 championship for Wales is not bad.
Depending on bonus points. Because England lost and to win 3, you'd have to beat Scotland. So it'd only be France, the only other team who could possibly go undefeated.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think for anybody in Wales or outside of Wales to fancy Wales, in the rest of the Six Nations matches, they're going to have to show more performance than they did on the weekend. There was a lot of progress in last week's performance. I still don't think it would have been enough to beat 15-man Ireland. I don't. And that's not to take away from the positives. I think there were an awful lot of things from the autumn that needed fixing. Like when you go through the list of what wasn't functioning for Wales in the autumn, you've got defence. I'd say attack as well. I think you were still seeing a real struggle for us to kind of put into motion the way Pivac wants to play with the ball in hand. So I guess what we're saying is from the autumn, the things that were well short of the mark were attack and defence, scrum and line out.
Now it's just attack.
Whereas I feel like the scrum's been solved. I feel like defensively we were a lot tougher to break down. I feel like our line out is the big issue. But I think there was enough progress in that performance from some of the abject ones we saw last year. But I still think it's well short of, where we want to be ultimately. I still think it's well short of, if Scotland play like they did last weekend and we play like we did last weekend, Scotland will beat us by 20 points and it'll be comfortable. So, we'll see.
There we are. That's our summary of the Six Nations for this weekend. We're looking forward to the fixtures going forward. Looking at the time, I think we're going to look at the F1 next week. Just because we're running a bit short of time. We've still got a bit of the football that we'd like to do. And the F1, we don't want to rush it because we've got some
quality
interesting topics. Yeah, we've been saving it up for a little while now, so we don't want to rush it. So we'll do that next week when we haven't got the NFL. We'll do that then. But anyway, we'll move on to Shock of the Week next. If I go first, then followed by Josh, then followed by Jack, because Jack's kind of segues on to the football.
Sounds good.
So my Shock of the Week is the Chiefs having a blowout. Simple as that. It really just, we've already discussed it, but as in the fact that we didn't even score a touchdown was, as the title of this section says, was rather shocking.
That's Mahomes' first game in the NFL without a touchdown.
Crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
It's his first game that he's lost by more than 8
in
the NFL, which is nuts. There we go.
There we are. Josh, what was your Shock of the Week?
My shock of the week was Wales beating Ireland. I didn't see it coming.
Yeah. No, I don't think anyone did really, did they?
There were 3 sports matches on Sunday that I felt highly invested in, and they were Wales against Ireland, Liverpool against Man City, and Chiefs Bucks. And out of the 3, the day before, I can't remember who I was talking to, but the day before I remember saying, Liverpool, not confident, Chiefs, I think will win, Wales beating Ireland, not happening. And the complete opposite happened. I didn't see the Chiefs losing, I did not see Wales beating Ireland, but that's what happened.
There we are. And Jack, your shock of the week?
My shock of the week was Mike Dean's red card decision.
That was shocking.
I watched that in live time and I thought,
Stinker.
Surely not. Any human, any referee with common sense looks at that and goes,
No.
that's not a red card. No shape of the word is that elbow intentionally going to hit somebody in the face. He's literally just trying to adjust his body from being goal side of Mitrovic to the other side of Mitrovic, and he's got to move his arm somewhere, and they've gone, well, he's elbowed him in the nose. It's like he's hardly doing an uppercut on him. He's just trying to rotate around the man. So, yeah, that was my shock of the week, just how shocking that decision was.
There we are. On that note, football. Jack, do you want to kick us off with the first match that we're going to discuss?
Yes, I shall. I took a lot of happiness. There were very small glimmers of hope of happiness in my weekend. And one of them was Manchester City beating Liverpool 4-1. I just, internally, as much as it puts City in a better position to win the league, and that's probably not good from a United fans' point of view because we're sort of second and we're quite close to catching them up. But 4-1, it was just lovely to watch them absolutely annihilate them, really.
I'm
Josh?
half poking fun you, but it is a genuine question. So you would rather be beaten to the league title by your City rivals than by Liverpool?
Yeah. I think the rivalry between Liverpool and United's more vivacious or more visceral than the one between United and City. Mostly because the United-Liverpool one's got a history, whilst the City one's sort of built on money. And as well, I think there's more people who are Liverpool fans than City fans, so you get more jip when Liverpool do well than when City do well. So yeah, it's got a couple of sides to the coin, but I was particularly happy. But also that's back-to-back defeats for Liverpool in Anfield, which shocks me. You know, only because it was just like, that's such a fortress for so long, and it's like to go 3 on the bounce is crazy.
And yet on form, it's not shocking really, is it? As in, on form, you would have been crazy to think that it couldn't happen, really. City, they're playing the way they are, we're playing the way we are.
Yeah, but you know, it's just I don't think going into this season at any point would I have thought Liverpool are going to lose 3 games at home in a row. I think that's just such a wow moment.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
And it kind of turned on the turn of the year, didn't it? Our last match of 2020, we knocked 7 past Crystal Palace, hit the top of the table at what felt like just the right time, and then the wheels have come off badly over the course of 6 weeks, haven't they?
Yep.
I guess the question is, Jack Slade, I'm asking you as a fellow Liverpool fan, are you still confident of Liverpool getting into the top 4? And when I say still confident, a couple of months back we were like, oh yeah, Liverpool definitely finishing in the top 4. Now we know better, don't we? Would you say you are confident of them getting into the top 4?
It's a tricky one, and I'll tell you why. Based purely on Liverpool's form, no. But based on the way this season has gone, I have a little bit more faith. Just because, like, for example, for ages everyone was like, oh, United are doing so well, and then I think they drew and lost, or they lost to Sheffield, like just out of the blue randomly. Jack has said this already, I've said it already, is in teams are going to drop points between now and the end of the season. The only team that looks like they're not going to drop points is City. I This is a cop-out, but I really don't know. I really don't know how this is going to go. I think if we are going to get top 4, things need to turn around fairly quickly.
I feel like it's a lot of the different, not storylines, but the ways teams are playing. In a sense, Liverpool have sort of been living off of that very good start you had, because I think you're still playing with that awesome style of football and swagger that you came into the season with for a large part of it, and you were first. But since that point, it's going downhill, and it's almost like you're still living off some of those points which you got quite early on in the season. But now you got teams. Well, a few teams could go above you if they win their games now. And obviously, that's just something we've mentioned in the past. But you've got teams like Chelsea doing particularly well now that they got Tuchel, Everton, West Ham, and Spurs are playing bad, and they're still only 4 points off. Well, actually, they could be 1 point if they win their game. So it's like, I'm not saying that Liverpool are just clinging on, but they're still living with, and those points they got quite early in the season are very much helping them still be in the in the top 4 at the moment.
I'm going to put a bit of potential wisdom out there. Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
There's
a
big pause.
I was thinking, that's all the wisdom he's got. He hasn't got much then, has he?
The wisdom is, I think it's crazy for any fans of any Premier League team to say they're confident of finishing in the top 4 apart from Man City.
Really?
Yeah, I agree.
I'm looking at the table.
Completely agree.
I'm looking at the table here. If City win their game in hand, which on current form they are the only team in the league that you could say, yeah, I think they will win their game in hand. City will be 8 points clear. So Man United are 8 points behind Man City. If you go back a further 8 points, you're down to 8th. Mm-hmm. And Everton and Spurs have got games in hand. So have Villa. So assuming that they get some points, it takes you down to 10th. So there's the same gap between first and second as there is between second and 10th. What does that tell you? The team in first, unless something cataclysmic happens at Man City are finishing in the top 4. From second to 10th, none of those teams can say they're going to be confident of it. None of them, because as terrible as Liverpool's January and start of February has been, and let's not mince our words, Liverpool have had a terrible start to 2021. They are
diabolical.
They are only 5 points behind United. That is 2 wins, and they've still got 15 games left to play each. Put that into perspective. Last season, Liverpool were 25 points clear at the top. So just to put into perspective how small a gap that is over a 15-game run-in for the end of the season. And that's not me taking an unnecessary swipe at Man United. Out of 2nd to 10th, who's the most likely at the moment? Well, Man United, because they're top of the pile. But if United lose 2 games in a row and Villa win 3 in a row, well, Man United will be behind Villa. And it's not unheard of for a team like Man United or Leicester to go and lose 2 in a row. So, yeah.
That's not 100% true. Because, well, firstly, the gap of 8 points...
Absolutely true.
9th. But if Villa have to win those 2 games in hand and then win the next 3, then yes, that is the case. But you also got you can't just look at it straight of points. Oh, okay, this is how many United could be off City, and that's how much further down it is. You look at the form. Some of those teams down in the bottom area are really not particularly well.
But that's the point, though,
But
Jack,
none of the teams, apart from City, are carrying form. For me, City are the only team who are consistently winning matches. Like, United are second because they deserve to be second. But United are dropping points. United let Everton back in.
Pretty decent streak for a while. And to be fair, yes, we lost to Sheffield United, which we shouldn't have, and we had the last-minute goal against Everton. But though obviously they're not good, and obviously it's like, well, you're still dropping points, so there's nothing more we can say about it. But it's like those are sort of freak moments or freak results. I wouldn't have said that those were indicative, because then you go and you say, okay, even if in your last 4 you've only won 1, we won that one 9-0. So there's still that air of we're still pretty good and we're still confident. And
since the start of January, and I'm in no position. I'm not trying to say ha here. Liverpool's form is probably the worst out of the top 10. But United, since the start of January in the Premier League, beat Villa, beat Burnley, beat Fulham. So you've had 3 wins in a row. But then lost to Sheffield United, drew at Arsenal, beat Southampton, drew at Everton. So you've had 3 wins in a row to start the year, which I would class as good form. But I'd argue since halfway through January, your form is mixed. You've got a couple of wins, a couple of draws, and a loss. That's mixed form for a team that wants to get into the top 4. So,
I know what you mean.
And that's indicative of all of the teams that are in that little batch of teams. I mean, really, looking at it, that batch goes down to Leeds. That batch goes down to nearly. No, I'd say possibly not. Let's stop it at Villa. I don't think it's out of the question for one of those teams to go on a run and for one of those teams to bomb. Like, what I'm saying is United could now go on a run to the end of the season, and I think they'd still finish second, probably convincingly, because I think City... I'm happy to assume now that City are going to go on and win it unless something really changes there. But Leicester, for example, could lose 3 in a row. That's not out of the question here, because none of these teams are showing good enough form to make you think that it won't happen.
Could lose 3 in a row.
Well, Liverpool Liverpool could continue losing. Liverpool could lose their next 3. Liverpool could turn it around and then go on a bit of a run. Like, Liverpool's form worries me the most. But this is the point I'm making. Even with our terrible form, we're still, even when games, assuming that all of those teams have played their game in hand, we'll be 5th, 6th. But what I mean is our form would make you think, really, our form at the moment, you would think that we'd be down in 8th or 9th. But probably, this is the point. Because everybody is dropping points at the moment, apart from City, back to the original point, I just don't think anybody should feel safe or secure. I don't. I guess what I'm saying is Man United have got to carry on winning games. United can't afford to draw their next 4 because they'll be out of the top 4. Simple as that. Assuming that at least 2 of the teams behind them, out of 7, win a couple of games. So it's really not going to take much for United, Leicester or Liverpool to drop out of the top 4. It's really not going to take much for West Ham, Everton or Villa to get in. So as a Liverpool fan, am I confident of us getting top 4? No, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm confident. I don't think we will continue playing this badly till the end of the season. That it's hard to even compute that happening. Do you know what I mean? It's got to turn around at some point. Balance of probability. You can't imagine them being this bad for 15 games. I mean...
You'd like to hope not.
You would certainly like to hope not. But
You'd certainly like to hope not.
But I don't know. I don't feel confident of Liverpool getting into the top 4. But like I say, I think, if a Leicester fan turned around to me and said, I'm confident of getting in the top 4, I'd say, oh, well, really?
If I'm honest, I am quite confident in Man United getting top 4.
Okay.
I just purely on the basis of that draw against Everton was a 90th minute last gasp by Calvert-Lewin, and I think that was a very bizarre one because I don't even know why he made a defensive change before. I don't know why he did that. And the loss to Sheffield United, I think those freak results, and you get 1 or 2 of them throughout the season, the really freak ones. And I don't know, I got a bit of confidence about it still, only because of how long that winning run was until we got that loss, and that loss in a sense was a bit of an odd one, and the draw was a bit of an odd last minute one. I do feel like United still have a good enough form as well to kick on a little bit.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but then again, you say they're freak results, but even accounting for assuming that you have those are your freak results, right now the gap is still only 5 points.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not talking about getting to City, but I don't think anybody
to
else...
Liverpool.
Oh, to Liverpool. You're on that way.
Because Liverpool are 4th, right? So Liverpool represent the base of the top 4 at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it's only 5 points, but like I was saying before, that 40 points which you've got, a big bulk of that came from the first half of the so far season, whilst it's the second half of it which is pretty concerning, where they've really dropped off. Oh,
in terms of momentum, Liverpool's momentum is worrying.
Which is why I was saying
absolutely
not holding on, but they are 4th at the moment on the basis of that first chunk of the season. So if you were looking at it in a sense of, you look at the second half almost of what's happened so far, it's like that was where, if you look at those sort of forms, I'd be particularly worried if I was Liverpool, only in the sense of you're probably dropping more points than quite a few of the other teams have done through the last few seasons, whilst I feel like some teams like Chelsea and United are perhaps picking up a few more than the majority.
Well, it's interesting actually, because if you put it this way, so what you're saying is right about Liverpool, is in they got a big haul of points to start off with, and then they've had very few points in the most recent patch. But then if you look at Chelsea are currently in 5th with a point less than Liverpool, and they've been patchy, as in, they've kind of won a game, drawn a game, won a game, lost a game, as in, and again, that's 6 points, and that's 5th between United and 5th.
Here's the thing.
So
this is what I mean now about Liverpool's form is bad. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
Liverpool's next 2 fixtures are Leicester and Everton. Even though Liverpool's form is bad, it wouldn't be unthinkable for Liverpool to go and beat Leicester on the weekend.
No, not right.
Because even in amongst this terrible run of form, like Liverpool went and won at Spurs, and okay, Spurs weren't brilliant, but I don't think Everton had the finished article. They're miles from it. So, or Leicester. So, Liverpool, as bad as their form is, if Liverpool get 2 wins in a row against Leicester and Everton, all of a sudden, Liverpool would be well on track to get the top 4. And this is the point I'm making. It's so kind of polarising at the moment. You win one match and all of a sudden you're in a really good position. You lose your next one and all of a sudden you're kind of almost down the pecking order behind 3 teams, subject to games in hand. So it's that volatile. That's the word I'm looking for. The table is so volatile this season, where you win one match, you jump 2 places, you lose one, and all of a sudden you've dropped 3 again. And it's because it's so tight, and because nobody apart from City has got a really good run of momentum going. I wouldn't like to be predicting that top 4. Like, I wouldn't. It could. I'm genuine now. I don't think it will be, but it could arguably be Man City, West Ham, Everton, Villa. On form. Because West Ham are playing well, Everton are playing well, Villa are playing well. So
I feel
why
like
not?
They're going the other way. I feel like they've lost some of that form which they had.
Villa?
Yeah, I don't feel like they were as good as they were.
Yeah.
I know West Ham are doing particularly well. Did you say Leicester or Everton as the other one?
Everton. But listen,
I'll be honest, I think Everton are going to go downhill now that they've just lost Calvert-Lewin to injury.
We'll see. I don't think. Well, their form clearly hasn't been bad relative to the teams around them. I think Chelsea's form over the last 3 or 4 games has been good relative to the teams around them. They've jumped up from 10th to 5th in the space of 3 weeks. And Chelsea and Arsenal were kind of level. But again, right, this is the point. Chelsea and Arsenal were virtually level pegging 3 weeks ago. When Lampard got sacked, I think Chelsea were 1 place ahead of Arsenal, and I think 1 point ahead of them. Well, Chelsea are now 8 points ahead of Arsenal, but that's 3 wins, and Arsenal have got a draw and a couple of losses. So in the space of 3 games, Chelsea have completely separated themselves from Arsenal now. In a different fight altogether.
I do feel that's to do with some of the games they've played. Like, I know they beat Spurs, which is good, but you've also got to remember that Spurs aren't in the greatest of form. But also they've beaten Burnley, and I can't remember what the other one. No, they drew with Wolves. I can't remember what the other team was, but they haven't beaten electric teams, and at the same time, Arsenal have just gone and they've lost to Villa, which there is no shame in it. As much as Villa aren't doing great, or they are, they're sort of like a 50-50 at the moment. But you know what I mean. That's one of those which you can easily lose. And they drew with United, and that's the thing. That was one of United's draws was to Arsenal. And I feel like United are kind of just playing for the draws against the big teams to keep the points rolling in. But I feel like Chelsea are doing well based on who they've played. In a sense, I do feel like it's very fixture based at the moment. It's who's playing who when, and when you're gonna be fortunate enough to play someone who's out of form or in form, because everyone's form's changing left, right, and centre.
Yeah,
tells you all you need to know what it's like to be a Liverpool fan at the moment. That genuinely inside of me, then I looked at our fixtures and I was like, oh, Leicester and then Everton. You're almost glad that it's not West Brom and then Fulham.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. There we are. I guess we've discussed Chelsea a little bit there, and we unbeaten and on a little bit of a mini run. Is it the fixtures they've got? Possibly. Who knows? I guess we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But going on from that, then I guess we should probably, if we have to discuss United's.
We haven't got it too much.
Record equaling.
It was very nice. It was very nice. I put it in there because I was like, oh, that was great, even though it has been quite a few days since it happened. But it was nice to beat, especially as it was Southampton. And Southampton are very much one of those teams at the moment who are on that one of those. I mean, they've lost 5 on the bounce, actually. That's a complete lie. But if you actually consider that to lose 5 on the bounce and be on 29 points, that's 10 points off Chelsea in 5th. That's actually pretty mental. Obviously, they're not going to win all 5 of those. But what the trend seems to be this season is everyone's winning half of their games. And then the other ones are sort of a mixed bag between draws and losses. Let's say they're averaging, say, 2 points a game throughout those 5. I don't know why I was doing all the maths in my head then, and I came to actually working it out. They'd be close to the top 4. I lost my trail of thought. I did halfway through it, but that to be 12th, but still not miles off, is pretty impressive if they just lost 5 on the bounce. So not the worst team, but obviously not in the best of form either. So it was just quite nice for United to have a nice 9-0. Just thought I'd check it in there.
Fair enough. I mean, if Liverpool has a 9-0, well, I'm pretty sure we did when we had the 7-0 against Palace. I was wax lyrical, and Southampton did have a man sent off, but equally, teams quite often have a man sent off, and it certainly doesn't end 9-0. So credit to United, clearly very good in front of goal in that game. Right, finally, before we move on to our stat of the week, Mike Dean. We've already mentioned him previously. Red card. Bit bonkers, really, isn't it?
Do you think he should still be a ref in the Premier League? He makes so many completely bizarre decisions, and he just sort of gets bailed out of it somehow. And I can't even understand it. It's like that red card he gave. I mean, I don't think anybody watching that would have gone, on
red.
It's like, I almost feel like because of VAR, and now they're going, that's an offside. But it's like everyone's going, every single rule, oh, well, the elbows touched him on the nose. He's clearly tried
Definitives,
to...
yeah.
He's trying to break his nose. It's like, well, he's not trying to break his nose. He's trying to move. It's like, it's just life. It's just complete nonsense, that red card. I just don't quite understand how they get away. Because you see other sports, and, I mean, even the Super Bowl, a lot of people aired it and said this was bad. And quite often, they'll get cut. They'll be say, you're not going to ref a game for a while. You have to go do some college games or something. And they used to do that in the Prem, where you have to go do some championship ones now. And it's like they just... It almost feels like the FA protects certain referees, and it's...
Well, and this is the thing for me, right? When people say, oh, VAR is ruining the game, blah, 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 I'm kind of sat there like, at the end of the day, there are human beings who watch the VAR footage. The video itself, the fact that there is a video recording these things that can then be reviewed, is not the problem. It's the people who are then making the decisions based on that footage that are the problem.
Yeah.
Because they're making ridiculous decisions. As in, VAR isn't the problem there. The problem there is that VAR has recorded the footage and then Mike Dean has looked at it and just had an absolute stinker. Really, when you think about it. And this is one of the things that, I get the whole kind of, it spoils the flow of the game, blah, blah, blah. But I'm kind of like, at the same time, if the referees actually made good decisions based on the video footage, would we be talking about it? I'm not sure we would.
Yeah,
but I agree with you, Jack. I think
you shouldn't.
Yeah, that's how we should operate.
I'll be honest. This is why I think they need. I know they've got the mics on refs just to check that they're not saying anything they shouldn't. Since the, I think Anton or Rio Ferdinand issue. I think one of them racial.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a someone said something and it was referee. Did he say it or did he not? But it's like, why can't we just hear what the refs are saying? Surely, when Mike Dean is looking at that TV screen and going, looks like a red. It's like you'd love to hear his rationale rather than him just going, skimmed his nose. It's probably a red. It's like you cannot understand what is going through his mind when he's making those decisions.
No, well, and the thing is, I've seen footage before. They do it in the Australia football, don't they? As in our football now, not Aussie rules. As in actual football. They do it in the Australian League, and it seems to work well. And like you say, it gives an understanding of why they've made a decision. What's the basis for it? And I think ultimately, there's just, at the moment, there's a lack of accountability. As in, Mike Dean can make that error, and then it's down to the FA to decide what they do about it. And that's it, really. Whereas if you had the video, you had the voice, of Mike Dean saying, right, I think it's a red card because of X, Y, Z, then you kind of look at it and go, well, on those points, I guess he's kind of right.
Yeah, you need
Equally,
rationale.
if they have the if they have the voice footage and like you say, he just goes, oh, he's connected with the nose, red card. Then people need to ping him for it and go, no, that's not right.
Well,
that reasoning for that decision is wrong.
It's awful that someone can go to a screen for 5 minutes and look at something to give a red, and the very next day they rescind that red card. It's like, how on earth are these people able to rescind a red card? How on earth has that red card been given if he's been given 5 minutes to look at this thing? It's like, there's absolutely no question. If you're given that much time to review something and you still get it wrong, you don't deserve to be a referee.
Well, and this is the thing, is in, like, I remember there was a big discussion about the pressure, or fans pressuring in the stadium. That's gone at the moment because there's no fans in the stadium. So that's not the referee being influenced by the crowd. That's Mike Dean looking at the monitor, like you say, for 5 minutes and just making an absolute howler of a decision. Simple as that. There we are. Rant over. Josh, do you have anything to add?
No.
Good. I thought I was fairly comprehensive.
You've got it covered, yeah.
I'm here next week. Right. Should we move on to our stat of the week to finish off?
Let's.
I'll go first because mine's related to the football, as in our football, proper football. Man City's current run of 15 consecutive wins in all competitions is the longest in English football history by a top-flight side, which I thought was rather surprising. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
I wouldn't have thought that.
Bear in mind,
Premier League, or is that all competitions?
No. So that's including the FA Cup result last night, I believe, against Swansea.
I was going to say Liverpool went on. I don't know how many games yours was, but I was going to say I thought it was more than 15.
Yeah, but
yeah,
that's the thing. I think, and that's consecutive wins as well, not consecutive games without loss.
Well, that was the thing. Liverpool didn't drop a point for half a season, did they? I think it was a miracle.
But then we had
a draw against you.
But then we had Champions League fixtures intertwined. We had FA Cup fixtures which we lost and drew and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but still surprising, I thought. Yeah. Anyway, Jack, do you want to go next?
Yeah, mine was the stat I said earlier. Mahomes ran 497 yards before passes and sacks in the Super Bowl. That is the most pre-throw / pre-sack yards by any quarterback in any game this season. And I say that's in the Super Bowl that he's having to run that much. Just nuts. Unprecedented how bad that offensive line was.
And this is just nailed home by Josh's stat of the week,
which I've changed.
Oh,
is that okay?
Go on.
Go for
it. Yeah.
The stat I had there, I was looking at it and I thought, I kind of put that in, but that's been covered very well earlier on. So I've got another interesting stat, and that is that in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In the last 7 Super Bowls, the team that has won... Yeah. Sorry, I'm buying time. Making this up. Making this up on the spot.
I know the stat you're on about. That's a good stat.
Yeah. In the last 7 Super Bowls in a row, the team that has won the coin toss has lost the Super Bowl.
Which is crazy.
Wow.
Which is crazy. When you think that each time that coin is tossed, there is a 50-50 chance, you would expect... Well... I don't know what the confidence interval is, but you'd expect it to be no more than 4 or 5 out of 7. But all 7 of the last 7 Super Bowls have been won by the team that lost the coin toss.
Well, if you had said that stat before this game, we could have saved ourselves about 4 hours, Josh.
Yeah, our analysis on the Super Bowl. The Chiefs won the toss, so they lost the game. Simples. Let's move on.
Yeah, there we are. Right. That's it for the podcast this week. Like we said, we'll be talking about the F1 next week because we got a lot of stuff kind of built up from the past couple of weeks or so. Thank you all very much for listening. We are on Pocket Cast, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker. We are on Spotify. I think, have I said Spotify already? Maybe. We are also on YouTube. If you're on Spotify, why not give us a follow? If you're watching on YouTube, why not give us a subscribe? perhaps give the video a like and put a comment to say what you think. Josh, thank you very much for joining us.
A pleasure. Thank you for inviting me back.
Pleasure as always, Jack, and we shall speak to you next week.